Okay.
Elijah, I'm with the Northwest Iowa Review,
Okay.
and message really works in Iowa's reddest county and Sioux County. How is that going to translate once you're president, and there's going to be a whole lot of people that disagree with you, especially when you're going after specific groups like transgender people or anything like that?
I'm not going, so I appreciate the question. I made a commitment at the start of this campaign to ourselves more than anybody that the video that I launched with on day one, on what was it, February 21st this year, will be the same video that I launched the general election campaign with. I don't want to tell different groups different things. And so I believe that our message, I don't talk a lot about Republicans and Democrats. I doubt I talked about it today, or if I did, it was maybe once or twice at most. Talk about whether you're pro-American. Do you share the same value set this country was founded on? I think most Americans do, actually. I think 80% of this country does, and half the 20 are people younger than you and I who never learned those ideals in the first place, and I think we're going to bring half of them along too. So I think we're going to win in a landslide. We're going to reunite this country, and that's what it's going to take to actually implement the next generation of the America First agenda. Thank you. Are you with somebody or?
The Iowa Standard, Jacob
yeah.
Hall. Talk just a little bit about what it's like when you're up there on the stage during the debate and you're getting all the arrows from everybody else, it seems like.
Yeah.
And Mike Pence's big speech just the other day.
Yeah, it's okay.
Really targeted.
I think that, first of all, if you can't handle the heat, you stay out of the kitchen, and I can definitely handle the heat. So if I'm going to sit across the table from Xi Jinping, I better be sitting across the table from the other people on that debate stage. I think the truth is I view many of them as good people who all need, many of them, certainly, in different roles in our national revival. But there are some deep-seated ideological disagreements within the GOP, and I think it's good that we're smoking them out. I don't think it's 1980 anymore. I don't believe in the Rip Van Winkle model of waking up after 43 years of slumber, reciting memorized slogans from 4 decades ago. I think the unique threats to liberty and prosperity and the United States physically are different today than they were in 1980. We're dependent on our enemy for our modern way of life. That's different. We never depended on the USSR for the shoes on our feet or the phones in our pockets. The USSR doesn't exist anymore, something that some people would do well to be reminded of. I think that the administrative state is far greater of a threat to liberty than even anything coming through Congress. And so I think that requires someone of a different generation to recognize, as Lincoln did, that the dogmas of a quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. And I think we have some in the GOP that are attached to the dogmas of a quiet past, and I have my eyes open to the realities of the stormy present. That's what I would say.
Aaron Navarro, CBS News. Your plan to reduce funding to federal agencies. 2 quick things. First, that man seemed to walk out as you were in the middle of talking about that policy idea. What do you make of that?
Look, I think that this is an issue that touches a nerve with a lot of people, so I'm not surprised. I wish he had stayed and challenged me so that we could actually have a debate on the merits. As some of you know, I do regularly give the mic to anybody who's even a protester. And that guy he didn't behave inappropriately, but even if people are screaming, I don't care. I'll give him the microphone. I'll hear him as long as I get to in return. So I think it was a lost opportunity for engagement, but that's okay. I understand that what I'm saying is a shock to the system. But the reality is a shock is what we need when we have an entrenched bureaucracy that's sucking the lifeblood out of our constitutional republic. This is where I'm different than pretty much every other candidate in the race. Even when it comes to the Department of Education, I'm not just going to put Betsy DeVos, who's a good person, on top and say, fix it. We have to shut it down because that bureaucracy shouldn't exist. So I don't believe these bureaucracies can be tamed or incrementally reformed. Some other candidates talk about replacing Christopher Wray. That's not the real problem with the FBI. It's the system itself. I've given a comprehensive, practical plan. Look at the speech I gave at St. Anselm College in New Hampshire a month or 2 ago. This isn't just a slogan. The 35,000 employees, we said what's going to exactly happen to them. 20,000 go home, honest work in the private sector. 15,000 get moved to the U.S. Marshals or to the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network at the U.S. Treasury or to the DEA. So this is deeply practical. And I think that that's what it's going to take to revive our country, but that is a quantum leap. It's not incremental reform. I think that's frightening to some people, but that's what I'm going to bring, and I intend to stand by my word.
Given the
real quick, and then we'll go to the next.
Given the wildfires in Hawaii, the hurricane in Florida, is FEMA one of those agencies you would shut down?
We have not specifically identified FEMA. We're evaluating systematically. USAID is USAID. I think that we also need to reduce our foreign aid where we have very little accountability right now in how that's done. So far agencies we've identified to shut down include the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the FBI, the U.S. Department of Education, the CDC. We've also identified a number of other agencies. I haven't previously publicly announced USAID, but that is one that is on our shutdown list, and we're evaluating many others as to whether they're outright downsized or as to whether they're outright shut down. Across the board, though, we will have a 75% headcount reduction in the federal employee headcount by the end of my first term, 50% of which we expect to have implemented by the end of the first year.
Anjali Hun with the New York Times. You have promised to use the U.S. military, if necessary, to take out Mexican drug cartels. Mexico's president has said explicitly that he rejects any effort by the U.S. military to intervene in Mexican territory. Would a President Ramaswamy really be willing to deploy the military on foreign soil against the express wishes of the Mexican president? And have you considered the effects on the U.S.-Mexican relationship, regarding trade and security, etc.?
So the current Mexican president will not be the president of Mexico when I'm the U.S. president. It will, because there's an election in Mexico in 2024. The lead contender appears to be Claudia Sheinbaum. So I'm going to use the fact that I'll be a new U.S. president in office and she'll be a new Mexican president in office as a chance to level set on the dialogue. And the conversation I'll have with Claudia, if it's her or whoever the successor is, but let's say it's her, the conversation I would have is, listen up. We want to help you regain your sovereignty from the Mexican drug cartels. We can do it for a tiny fraction, and it is a tiny fraction, of what we will have spent or what we have already spent in Ukraine. But you're going to have to solve that problem, or else we're going to solve it for you. The first thing we're doing regardless is we will put our own military on our own border. That helps already solve a major problem right there. But the analogy is if you have a neighbor whose dog repeatedly comes over to your yard and bites your family members and goes back and your neighbor doesn't do anything about it, you build a wall and the dog still keeps coming over and biting your family members, eventually you got to take the shotgun over to your neighbor's yard, shoot the dog. That's a legally, morally, and ethically justified thing to do. And so I think that we will, I hope, never get to that place because it will be a good thing for Mexico itself to regain its sovereignty from the Mexican drug cartels. We will help them actually do it. But my top job is to protect U.S. citizens on U.S. soil, and any foreign threats that result in American deaths on American soil, it is the job of the U.S. Commander-in-Chief to address it. And the first way I'll do it is by sealing the southern border using our U.S. military as the first step to seal the border itself. And I expect that we'll reach a diplomatic win-win with Claudia Sheinbaum or whoever the next president of Mexico is. I'll be elected in 2024, and I'll work with the next duly elected Mexican president to do the same.
Quick follow-up, what would helping them entail specifically?
It would, I think that'd be a conversation that I would have with the next president. I think that my hope is that she rejects the abrazos no balazos policy, the hugs not bullets, no hugs rather than bullets policy. So it will depend on what Mexico is itself able to do under a new administration that I hope looks very different than the failed leadership of AMLO leading Mexico on its way to be a failed narco state. And I think that that's a sad state of poor leadership by AMLO, but I'm more hopeful that the next Mexican president will be able to deal in a more rational way and be less captured by drug cartels along the way as well.
Veronica Trafelersi with CNN. I want to ask about Vice President Mike Pence's speech yesterday, Wednesday, sorry, after the days. He called on Republicans not to follow the siren song of cartelism and that it's replacing traditional conservatism. Do you think he's wrong about the state of the party? And then did you take the speech personally at all? Because he did mention Trump and you alluded to you.
So I don't take anything personally. You can't do that in this sport of politics. I think he's a good family man, and there's always something I'm going to find to respect about each of my colleagues in this race, and that's what I'll call them as colleagues. I think he's dead wrong. A little bit of Rip Van Winkle problem here in the Republican Party, reciting slogans memorized 40 years ago that are inadequate to 2023. The reality is, the thing that made Reagan such a great president is that he did what he needed to do in his era to address the unique challenges of his time. Slashing taxes, government regulations. Reagan bucked orthodoxies, even in his own party, to get done what needed to get done for the country. So I think the way we celebrate that legacy of Reagan is by behaving in that same spirit of uniquely meeting the challenges of our time, rather than parroting memorized slogans that don't match up to an era in which communist China, rather than the USSR, is the main threat that we face, that we're economically dependent on that enemy for our modern way of life, that the administrative state is a greater source of threat to liberty than Congress or the laws that are passed through the front door, that government tech censorship is a greater threat than even direct government censorship, using tech companies to do through the back door what government couldn't do through the front door. And I think there are a generation of leaders in the Republican Party that are ill-equipped to open their eyes and understand the unique threats of the present. And I would tell my friends and colleagues in this race, and I'd remind Mike Pence in a friendly way, that Lincoln was a great Republican too. As he said it well, I'll say it now. The dogmas of a quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. And my message to the Mike Pence, Chris Christie, Nikki Haley, Karl Rove, John Bolton wing of the party is that the dogmas of 1980 are inadequate to the unique challenges of 2023.
And then I just have two quick questions.
Yep.
Sorry. What would a Ramaswamy cabinet look like? Would you appoint, new people or more experienced people, since you yourself never held public office? And then would you pardon Proud Boy leader Enrique Torres?
I need to learn more about the Torres case, but what I have said is that we would pardon everyone who is a peaceful protester on January 6th. Peaceful protest should not be politically criminalized in this country, and anyone who is a peaceful protester that day will get a pardon from me, not in the last day of my administration, but on day one of the administration. So will Julian Assange, who was held to a different standard than Chelsea Manning. So will Douglas Mackey, who was held to a different standard than Christina Wong. So will Donald Trump, who's been held to a different standard than his political opponents. So that's what day one would look like in terms of pardons. What was your other question?
Your cabinet would be...
Cabinet. So I think the cabinet will be comprised of people with greater experience in the federal government than me, but people who share my fundamentally anti-government posture towards the administrative state, and also share my actual realist vision of foreign policy. It's going to look very different than the kind of people who currently staff the Biden administration, but even those who have staffed many others in the Republican administration. For example, though there may be some similarities, not exactly the same, but a lot of similarities between mine and Trump's foreign policy, there's no way John Bolton would be my national security advisor. And so there are going to be some serious changes that I make in making sure that the people who we put in those positions are actually aligned with the agenda that I'm advancing, something that I think we have room for improvement on, frankly, in how we lead the America First movement.
Guys, we have time for one more?
Okay.
Mr.
We'll give you a last one quickly, since she's local. Okay.
Well, we've
Go.
got room for two, right?
Okay, yeah, okay, fine. But quickly, I'll go quick on yours.
Mr. Ramaswamy, you said that you want to deport the family unit in the event if there's an undocumented immigrant who comes to the United States illegally. In the event that one of those undocumented immigrants has a child who is then given birthright citizenship, do you still deport the family unit? What's your plan?
The family unit will be deported. As a family unit, we'll never separate families, but we will debureaucratize the process for which law-abiding citizens and their families have a path to legal immigration into the country if they meet the criteria.
The child who was born in the United States, who is a birthright citizen of the United States, would also be deported in that,
Yes,
in that case?
that's correct. And I think that there are legally contested questions, and I'm honest about this. They're contested. But there are legally contested questions under the 14th Amendment of whether the child of an illegal immigrant is indeed a child who enjoys birthright citizenship or not. For example, nobody in legal academia or otherwise would dispute that the child of a diplomat does not enjoy birthright citizenship just because they're born here, because it says subject to the laws and jurisdiction thereof in the relevant portion of the 14th Amendment. And so if a person is here illegally, there's a 14th Amendment argument that even under current law that doesn't apply. We will follow the Constitution and the law, letter of the law to a T, but the point I was making with respect to the families, we will never use separation of families as a deterrent. I think that's a mistake. I'm a pro-family person. But we have to stand and abide by the rule of law where the families return to the country of origin. And then under the right circumstances, certain families will be given a path back through legal
So
immigration.
just to be 100% clear, the child who was born in the United States has American citizenship would also be deported.
Well, the has American citizenship is an assertion that you just made, right? Under the legal theory, and this is contested, but we will be on strong legal footing if we proceed on these terms. Under the legal theory that the child of an illegal immigrant is not someone who enjoys birthright citizenship, then it would be perfectly legally permissible to remove the entire family unit to the other country of origin and to provide a legal path back to citizenship for the entire family. That's the answer.
Thanks for taking one more. Brianne with the Des Moines Register. You've had several questions here today, here and in Okoboji, kind of asking for some clarity on your foreign policy
Yes.
position. Do you feel that that's something you have to answer for now, post-debate especially?
I think the reason I have to answer for it is other candidates, and not even really the candidates, but the political machinery around them and their super PACs included, have purposefully mischaracterized and obfuscated my foreign policy. And that's okay because I'm able to stand for what I actually stand for. I also think it's one of the more important questions that we should be confronting in the Republican Party. I do not want to see us march into World War III. I think that is a greater risk than most Americans appreciate, so we should be talking more about it, and I'm grateful for it. I think the Russia-China alliance is something that is the single greatest threat we face. No other candidate in either political party is even talking about it with remotely the level of clarity and precision that I have. So I think it's actually a good thing, but I think it's important that people understand that just because I'm a non-politician who doesn't recite chapter and verse what the neocon establishment has wanted the Republican Party to say for the last 20 years, doesn't mean that actually, to the contrary, I believe I will actually lead this country to be more strong and asserting its interests on the global stage because we stand on clearer, realist foundations when we do so. Nobody else is talking about protecting the homeland in the way that I am. Nobody's talking about declaring independence from China with the level of clarity or plan that I've offered. And same thing with respect to avoiding World War III itself or pulling apart the Russia-China alliance. So I think this is a good thing. I think it is a shame when other candidates use attacks on their opponents and mischaracterizations of what they say as opposed to actually having a vision of their own or having an open debate about disagreements. But the good news is I am standing very clearly about what my positions are from a foreign policy perspective so that we may have those debates because I do think there are real disagreements, deep-seated disagreements about the future of the foreign policy direction from a historical neoconservative direction favoring liberal hegemony to one of Nixonian realism, which is really what I favor. And I think I'm the person in this race who's best equipped to lead this country on the global stage with that realist vision that keeps Americans safe. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
All right, we'll
Thank
see you next time. Thanks, guys.